Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the SwanBank podcast. This is an actual thing now. You can find us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. So we've got no excuse now. We've got to keep doing these. I'm joined by Kathryn. How are you, Kathryn?
I'm good, thank you, Sam. Are you?
Good? Yeah, very well, thank you. How's your week been this week?
Well, my week's been okay. It's COVID, isn't it? We just plough on.
Yeah.
We just keep going the best we can. We have moments when you think, and then moments when you just pick yourself up, get on with it as best you can.
I feel like when you ask someone how they are at the moment, it's all the same response.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're trying our best.
We're trying really hard. What's been your highlight of this past week? Anything amusing going on? I tell you what, should we have an Alexa update?
Oh,
we heard last week that you tried to play some spa music, but you ended up with a sea shanty.
We did.
Any improvement on that?
Well, we haven't had any more sea shanties, so that is a plus.
Right.
However, Alexa does not understand me at all. It's really quite frustrating, even when I try and talk really posh.
Okay. When you put your phone voice on,
yes,
does it still not work?
Yes. No, Alexa does not understand me very well at all. So it's an ongoing challenge
but does it understand Lloyd?
Most of the time. But then if he does that Stokey thing of dropping your H's, then why do they do that?
Yeah, I was at. I feel like I need to get this off my chest. I was talking to Alyssa yesterday, and she was talking about having to go and see someone in Abbey Holton, but she's Abbey Alton. I said, "Where are you going?" Abbey Alton. Like, where are you going? Abbey Holton. Like, come on now.
What is that? You can get into real trouble, actually, with dropping your H's. I've had a couple of close shaves of trying to understand people with on one occasion. This week, actually, someone said something and it sounded really, really rude. And I had to sit and think, I'm pretty sure they did not say that. I got there in the end and they didn't say what I had thought they'd said, which is good. But yeah, that dropping the H's can catch you out, can't it, when you're not from this area?
Terrible. Yeah. And there's all sorts of random words that people from Stoke use that I'm still trying to get my head around. Yeah.
Doing a foreigner? Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
That's like a job on the side.
I know, yeah.
I didn't know that.
So my Alicia's dad, Ivan, is a floor layer.
Uh-huh.
And he, when I first moved, would quite often talk about doing a foreigner, which I was very confused by at the beginning.
I didn't know that until...
I feel like we should move swiftly on.
Probably we should.
Move swiftly on from this. Great. Lots of stuff going on in the life of SwanBank at the moment. What's been one of the best things that you've seen going on around the life of the church in the past week?
Do you know what I really loved about this week is I loved being on the SwanBank sofa on Sunday night with Lee and Lindsay Jennings.
Amazing. Absolute heroes they are.
Really liked being with them.
Yeah. They're funny. They're good fun.
They are really good fun, and just they're just really down to earth, and they get it, and they love Jesus, and it's times like that when you have conversations with people like that you just think, yes, this is good. Yeah.
I really want to be best friends with Lee.
Do you?
Yeah, I really do. So if you're listening, I am available.
That's
if
a
you're
bit
interested,
needy, Sam. It's a little bit needy.
Yeah. He's just great, though, isn't he?
He is.
He's everything you could want from a friend. Wonderful. You had an interesting Sunday morning as well. Do you want to tell people what you did on Sunday morning?
Yes.
They won't have seen you on the camera.
Yes. Yeah, you all think that I was having a cheeky Sunday morning off, don't you? You thought I was in bed in my pyjamas, skiving on, or if you're talking Stokey, bobbing off on Sunday morning.
Could you tell that neither of us are from Stoke? This is
but I was operating one of the cameras.
Camera up.
I was one of the 3 camera people. You got to experience it
from the other side.
I did, and I really liked it.
Good.
I really
liked it. So Kathryn won't be preaching on a Sunday morning anymore because she's found a new calling in life.
And I learned how to do a lift.
A lift? Yeah.
Yes.
So those snazzy shots you see where it moves from the guitar playing up to the head.
Yeah.
See them singing.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You knew that was called a lift.
There you go. You got to experience some of the amusing content from our comms.
Yeah.
as well.
So let me tell you about this. So all of the techie people have a headset on so that they can chat to each other.
like about what we're doing.
Kind of about what they're doing. But every now and again, there's some random little conversations go on in the background, which are very funny. And it just gave me a new insight, because I realise now when I'm usually up at the front, you lot are all just having a right laugh behind the scenes about, I don't know, something I'm wearing or something I've said or something I've done. Usually with me, it's just pulling daft faces, isn't it? All the time. Because for 2.5 years, we've been trying to get a good picture of me. A good still photograph of me, haven't we? Yeah. And we still haven't achieved it yet.
We've got some.
Well, they're all right, but they're not great. I just pull random faces all the time.
Yeah.
Dear
it's
me.
Funny. If you were, I don't know how we've got here, and I'm so sorry. But great. I've had a lovely time this week. There's been an abundance of sport on the telly this weekend, which I personally
rugby, lots of rugby.
Six Nations is back. We watched the Super Bowl. England won the cricket this morning. We're recording this on Tuesday, so England won the cricket this morning.
Stop there, Sam, because I now know why you were really tired at our staff meeting yesterday morning that you and me had, because you stayed up all night to watch the Super Bowl.
I didn't stay up all night, because I actually fell asleep on the sofa.
Oh. What time did you fall asleep?
Well, the thing didn't start till 11:30 at night, so I think I watched about half time. So it was about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, okay.
And I fell asleep on the sofa. Yeah.
Oh, well.
Okay. So, but I will admit it wasn't the most professional choice I've ever made in my life. But what I know I'm a big sport fan. I love it.
Yes.
But it did make me a bit sad, because those things like the Six Nations, the Super Bowl, are things that would be natural, like gathering points for our bunch of friends. And I feel like something like the Six Nations is something that people gather, even if they're not really that interested in rugby, people still, because it's like once a year, people get together and there's that sense of being together and gathering together. Which so it made me a bit sad this weekend, I have to say, and missing out on spending time with friends and family and doing that stuff. We had to move our family Zoom in time for the Wales-Ireland game on Sunday afternoon, because it's such a big part of our family
I hate
thing.
rugby.
Do you?
I really like sport. I like almost every sport.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Even Kabaddi. But where did that come from? Where did that come from?
Where have you found that from?
I have no idea, but
you're gonna have to explain what Kabaddi is.
Kabaddi, well, it's kind of.
Is this a Geordie thing again?
Do you not know what Kabaddi is? Oh wow! Okay, Google it.
Okay.
Kabaddi is a sport. Trying to think where it comes from, but have watched it a few times because my brother is just mad on sport. So I grew up watching random sport. Yeah. But it's this sport with a ball. I can't remember now. With a ball and teams, and you have to shout Kabaddi, Kabaddi, Kabaddi.
Wow.
You need to watch it actually. You might learn to love it.
Is this a sport that your brother's just made up?
Nope.
To make you shout random words?
Google it.
Okay. Fine.
Your friends will be listening to this saying, can't believe Sam's never watched Kabaddi.
Great. Wonderful. We're all learning something new today. This is great. One of the things we're trying to do with this podcast is to pick up on a story that we've seen in the news and just maybe help us to get a bit of a biblical perspective on it, to help us think about it in a bit more detail. So, Kathryn, what's the thing that's really stood out to you as you've been watching the news the last few days?
Okay, so I was listening to the radio and it was talking about the issue around universal credit.
Okay.
And that last March, when lockdown happened, they upped universal credit by £20 a week. And obviously we're almost at March again, so you know that was done for a season, and then the potential was to then lose the additional £20 a week. Right. But lots of people, lots of charities, particularly like things like the Joseph Rowntree Trust and charities that do a lot of work around poverty. Yeah. Are saying that this will be absolutely disastrous for people on universal credit. Now, to be fair, the government are not talking about removing it totally,
Yeah.
but they're talking about what this looks like next. So one of the suggestions has been, rather than £20 a week, they give a one-off of £1,000
Okay.
to cover the year of the additional money. But again, organisations are saying for people to be able to budget, that's just so unhelpful.
Yeah.
And it might mean actually that if like the one-off comes, it'll come at a certain time, and then someone might lose their job the next week and won't be able to access that at all. Or indeed, someone on universal credit might get more hours in their job, or might get a job if they haven't got one, and have had the £1,000 when actually they're then earning and wouldn't necessarily desperately need that. So just that idea of challenging the government, and as they make a decision about what this looks like, to ensure that they keep the £20 top up a week.
So we don't raise this to try and make any sort of political point. I don't think we raise this just to highlight the conversation, really, and highlight the real desperate need that still exists within our society. We are a church in the midst of an area of quite severe deprivation, where a significant amount of people would access things like universal credit. And so for us, it's really important that we are aware of these sort of conversations that are going on. And, you might think, oh, well, it's going to be the same amount of money, £20 a week for a year, or £1,000 lump sum, but it's about how that help and support actually plays out as a reality in people's lives, and whether it really is the best thing to help those people who are in such desperate need.
I mean, this has been a conversation going on in the news for quite a while, so I have been tracing it over the last few weeks actually, and heard some more on the radio driving to work this morning actually, but I listened to a mum who was speaking last week, and she was just saying how much of a difference the £20 a week has made to the life of her and her child.
Wow.
And she said basically that £20 a week has been the difference between them being able to buy fruit and not.
Gosh. Okay.
So, and actually fruit is not cheap.
No.
But she is someone who she does work, but she's just on such a poor income, such a low income, and her work is so sporadic. She can't rely on it. And the whole 0 hours contract stuff, and all of those kind of things that just don't even give people a fighting chance is not where we should be as a society. It's not good enough.
No.
And when we see that played out within the life of our church in many ways, and we do, don't we, Sam?
Yeah.
I mean, most days we'll have someone knocking on the doors of the church, seeing if we've got, if we've got some food that we can share with them. If last week I came out of a meeting to answer the door to a guy who was just saying, "Have you got a spare coat?"
Wow.
And we found a coat in the back and gave him that. But there are some really tough things going on in people's lives, and you would think in a society like ours we would be able to do better.
And we as a church, we support the Stoke-on-Trent Food Bank, which has a distribution centre here, and Wednesdays are always a busy day, and we always have countless people in, lots of families actually, and when you see the number of children is always quite significant in the amount of people that they're offering food to, and we have an amazing team of volunteers who
the team are just amazing, so committed, aren't they?
But it's a real sign of the need that exists in our community, and I think there is misconceptions around food bank, that it's a certain sort of person that accesses the food bank, but that's just not the case, is it?
It's not. I mean, we get a whole breadth of people accessing the food bank. Now, I just remember, I mean, I've shared this story before and in different contexts, but I remember being at a meeting at another church, actually, before lockdown. And a guy came up to me and said, "Oh, are you the minister at SwanBank?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, that's great." He said, would you mind passing a message on to the food bank team? And he said, "I came to the SwanBank food bank at a time when I just lost my job, I couldn't pay the mortgage. I didn't know how I was going to provide for the family. I was going to feed the family. He said I was absolutely desperate. And he said, and I reluctantly came to the food bank. And he said, and I was welcomed, and they called me a guest.
Wow.
And he said I was welcomed like a guest, and he said the fear that I had of coming was just not the reality. As I was welcomed and treated like a proper human being, and shown care and consideration. And he said, and that meant the world to me. And he said, and consequently, I've got a job. We're doing fine as a family. He said, but I regularly give to the food bank now.
Wow.
And stories like that break down any kind of misconceptions that some people might have.
The language there is really significant, actually. The referring to him as a guest rather than a client or whatever that's about hospitality. That's about welcome. It's if you use the word client, it's like they're just like a number on a page, whereas that's not what when you observe the food bank happening. It is. It's about hospitality. It's about welcome. It's about
and with a guest, with that language of guest, with a guest, if you have a guest coming into your house, you'll ask them how they are. Yeah. You'll maybe chat about what's going on in their lives. Yeah. You'll hear their story. Everyone's got a story to tell, haven't they? And that's true for the guests who come to the food bank. Yeah. Each one of them have got a story to tell, and actually some of the stories are really heartbreaking stories of real sadness, and people who've just had a tough deal in life, or some who've had a really poor start in life and haven't been able to recover from that. Yeah. Others who life's been going okay, and then suddenly something's happened, and and in a moment their situation has changed. So there's the whole variety of people. And that's one of the hard things about this time. And I know, chatting to the food bank people here, actually not being able to welcome people into the building like we would usually do pre-COVID is really difficult, because it does feel like that people are a little bit more like clients rather than food bank users rather than guests, because we can't welcome them in, we can't give them a cup of tea, we can't sit and have the chats with them that the team here usually do so well. So roll on the time when we can get back to normal, and I mean, roll on the time when we don't need a food bank, but we know that's a long way off. But if we can do the best we can to welcome people, that matters.
So we don't just do this stuff because we think it's a good idea. There is stuff that informs the way we respond to people who are in need, and we often find that stuff in the stories of Jesus, really. And I wonder if there's a particular story or a particular moment from Jesus' ministry that your mind goes to when we're talking about some of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot that we could pick up from how we see Jesus working. But I guess one of the challenging pieces around this would be there's a part in the Bible where Jesus is in a place called Bethany, and Mary comes with some really expensive perfume. Starts to anoint Jesus with this really expensive perfume. And one of the disciples, Judas, challenges her. And says, "What are you doing with that? We could do so much with that. Actually, we could do so much to feed the poor. With the money that you've just wasted anointing Jesus." And Jesus actually challenges that and says, "You will always have the poor with you." Which actually,
interesting.
That's quite an interesting statement, isn't it? And just trying to think through what Jesus was saying in that statement. So it's important to hear that he says, "You'll always have the poor with you, but you won't always have me." And that's him talking about that he was actually going to die. So we recognise that that's Mary anointing Jesus for his death. There's something significant going on in that moment. And we do know that ultimately, we're told we've always got God with us. Jesus said, "I'll be with you till the end of the age." This is Jesus risen from the dead. So we've always got Jesus with us. But that statement, "You will always have the poor with you," could be really misunderstood and misused. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts around that, Sam.
Well, is what would Judas have understood by Jesus's answer there? Is Jesus making reference to something else from the Old Testament?
Yeah. So, if we looked into that that statement, you can find it in Matthew chapter 26 for anyone who's interested at verse 11. But some think that it picks up some teaching from Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, because there's a part in Deuteronomy 15 that says there will always be poor people in the land.
Okay.
And it goes on to challenge them actually that they are to be open-handed towards those who are poor and needy in your land.
Yeah.
So that to have that extra bit in actually brings a whole different understanding.
Sure. That word open-handed.
Yeah.
Is really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's almost about us letting go of control of what we have.
Yes.
What we perceive as ours.
Yeah.
And just being like almost lavish, really incredibly generous with what we have, because we recognise that there are people who are so in need to a greater extent than we are.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I find really challenging about that conversation we've just had about, not just inviting people to a food bank to give them food and then send them packing.
Yeah.
It's about so much more than that. You invite somebody round to your house for a cup of tea. You don't just give them a cup of tea at the doorstep and then pack them off.
Yeah.
You might do at the moment, but that's that you would normally do that because the need is not necessarily giving them a cup of tea.
Yeah.
The need is a conversation, a point of connection, a chance to pray with someone. Do you know what I mean? And that's, I think, is as I've grown in faith and as I've read more into the stories of Jesus, you see that Jesus isn't just about meeting the need that's staring you in the face. Mm-hmm. He's about the level below. Mm-hmm. He's about the real. Yeah. It's Jesus is interested in the whole of our being. It's I was on the sofa with Shirley a couple of Sunday nights ago, and the story of Jesus healing the man by the pool. His question is, do you want to get well? It's not, do you want to be healed? It's not, do you want to be saved? It's, do you want to get well? Which to me is like wellness is about every part of you, and Jesus being interested in every single part of who you are, and wanting to have an impact and an influence in every single part of our lives, whether that be physical need, spiritual need, emotional need, whatever. He's interested, and he's able to have an influence. And
that, I think that's really important, because if we believe that God has made us, which as Christians we believe that, then we recognise, I mean, there's another part in the Bible, in the Psalm 139, that talks about us being fearfully and wonderfully made. And we see that, don't we? We're really complex people. But we're not just body, but we're spirit and we're soul, and and so there's the physical and there's the emotional and there's the spiritual, that's all kind of tied into a sense of well-being. Yeah. So if one area is lacking, then our sense of well-being is lacking as well. And so I would say part of the calling of the Christian is to look to a more holistic sense of well-being of us, which very much includes the spiritual dimension. And for us, we would say that actually the foundations of who we are as Christians is obviously relationship with Jesus Christ, and that I would see that as a basic human need as well, actually. But so is feeding hungry tummies. And looking towards physical well-being. As well. I
can remember years and years ago listening to a sermon by Mike Pilavacci, and we're talking about, I think he was talking about rest or self-care or something. And one of the things he said was, maybe what God wants you to do is just to order a Chinese and sit in front of a film for an evening. And I'm not saying you should do that instead of going to the Bible and praying, but there's a principle there around, God understanding what our needs are, and sometimes we literally just need to be able to switch off and to enjoy some nice food. Or do you know what I mean? That.
Yeah, and we've got to get that balance really, really careful, actually, because I mean, there's another part in the Bible that says, "Love others as you love yourself," and that's one that's often talked about in terms of self-care. That I don't want to turn this into a podcast about caring for ourselves and forgetting actually that it starts at a place of being open-handed and caring for others. But there is a line of thinking that will say to us, if you don't know how to care for yourself, then do you fully know how to care for the other, for another person? And I think there is some truth in that when we learn that what it looks like to care for ourselves as well, we better learn how to care for others. And it's keeping that balance
is really important
in all of that.
We had a really interesting conversation in our home group a couple of weeks ago around looking back to a year ago. What did loving your neighbour look like a year ago compared to now?
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is a really interesting thing to reflect on.
Yeah.
Because a year ago you were out and about, you were with people. Maybe the need was a little more obvious, perhaps. But maybe we didn't necessarily have the time or the headspace to be able to like process it and respond to it. Whereas now we've got maybe more time to be able to process and respond to a need.
Yeah.
But the need is more hidden because we're not out and about. We're not seeing people. We're not. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a really interesting challenge to bring it back to the news story we were reflecting on. That's something that, until you'd said it earlier on, I'd not spotted the stuff about universal credit in the news at all. And so it's really important that we are, in this time of lockdown, maybe more proactively seeking out where the need is, because it's likely to be more hidden probably at the moment, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I certainly think that in Burslem, where we're based here, that the needs are often very obvious, aren't they? It's very usual for us to walk outside the church, to walk across the road to the pie shop or something like that, and we'll see homeless people around. We know them, so we sometimes chat to them, don't we? Or maybe we'll see them gathering in the square. And while we do see that to a certain degree, not so much, and partly maybe because it's winter as well. People are trying to find a warm place to be. But I would say that it's not quite been as obvious unless you take yourself off to Hanley or something like that. But we're just not doing that at the moment because the shops are shut. So actually we're not seeing things in the way that we might usually see it. And sometimes we've got to be really careful that it's not out of sight, out of mind.
Definitely.
But actually that we're called to be mindful about what's going on around us and to see and have our eyes open and respond.
And there's something there as well about having our eyes open to what's going on in ourselves as well, to bring it back to that whole self-care thing as well. It's about being just living with our eyes open to not only how we're feeling, but what need is going on sort of out there, out in the world. And there's a real challenge to be, our calling as followers of Jesus is to be people who bring God's kingdom, who work for the growth of God's kingdom where we are. And I think what is challenging from the news story, from that story of Jesus and Mary and Judas, is bringing God's kingdom is about the whole picture. It's about the whole of society, and bringing that sort of godly upheaval, that theme we've been talking about in our evening services, to the whole of society, wherever we're able to have an impact, to be people who brings God's kingdom there.
Absolutely. And we could misunderstand that verse from Matthew's gospel. You'll always have the poor with you. Therefore, why bother? There's always going to be poverty. So actually, it's a pointless battle. And we know that's a complete misreading of that passage.
Should make that very clear. That's not what we're saying.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying the opposite, actually. But I think it is saying, so you'll always have the poor with you, but you won't always have me, Jesus said. So I think there is something about Jesus first and foremost. And when we have Jesus first and foremost, then that an authentic following of Jesus, being an authentic disciples, then in a sense gives us our guidance for how we're to live our lives. And therefore we see Jesus all the time responding to poverty and to need around. I mean, that's what he did the whole time, was he responded to people's needs.
And seeking those people out. Absolutely. Not just letting them come across his path, but going out of his way.
There was both, wasn't there? There's people who came and found him, and people who he went and found. We see both, and therefore that is our calling. People might come and find us out to to have their needs responded to, and that's not us respond to the needs as much as it's being open to God working through us. But us going out and finding as well where those needs are and responding, and that's a Christ-like way of working. And I think we need to take that seriously in our lives and in the life of our churches, because if we're not responding to the needs of the poor, then actually we're not following in the footsteps of Christ.
Yeah, that feels like a good place to end.
It does.
We hope you've enjoyed listening. We hope you've been challenged by some of the stuff, the conversation you've heard. We'd encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, particularly if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, and give us a rating. 5 stars would be wonderful if you've enjoyed it. If you're going to give us a bad rating, please don't bother. That would be wonderful. But we'll be back next week with more conversation, another Alexa update.
Absolutely,
I hope.
yeah.
Maybe practice your phone voice
the
for
ongoing
Alexa.
saga of me and Alexa.
Yeah. And we'll see you very soon. Thank you for listening.